Good evening. I'd like to call the November 26, 2013 Longmont City Council meeting to order. This is a regular session. Could we please start with the roll call?
Yes, Mayor Coombs.
Here.
Council members Bagley.
Here.
Christensen. Here. Finley. Here. Levison. Moore.
Here.
Santos.
Here.
Mayor Coombs, we have a quorum.
Okay, let's stand for a pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Anyone wishing to speak at first call, public invited to be heard, will need to add his or her name to the list outside the council chambers. Only those on the list will be invited to speak at first call, public invited to be heard. Speakers who do not place their names on the list will have an opportunity to speak during the public hearing items this evening or at final call, public invited to be heard on any item at the end of the meeting. Okay, so we got approval of the November 11th, 2013 organizational meeting. Can I have a motion? Okay. Councilmember Finley.
I move to approve the minutes of the November 11th meeting.
Okay, it's been seconded. Let's vote. Okay, that passes 6-0 with Councilmember Levison absent. Okay, we also have the November 12th regular session. Council members Santos.
Thank you, Mayor. I move the approval of the November 12th regular session minutes.
Okay, that's been moved and approved. Moved and seconded. Let's vote. That passes 6-0 with Councilmember Levison absent. Valerie, are there any agenda revisions or submissions of documents?
Yes, Mayor Coombs, after the original agenda went out, there were 3 items delivered to you as a supplemental agenda. They were, well, one will be added as consent agenda 9J, which is the purchase of the real property known as Royal Mobile Home Park. Another one will be added as consent agenda 9K, which is 2,000 contracts with economic development partners. And item 11A, which is the board and commission interview plan, was also part of that supplement package.
Okay.
And that's it.
Is there a report from the city manager?
No report, Mayor, Council.
Okay. Well, the first person on the list is Brian Hansen. Please come down and state your name and address for the record.
That's right. I should know how to do this by now. I've seen a lot of people do it. Brian Hansen, 401 Mountain View Avenue. Well, just want to say hi to the mayor and city council members. Thank you for letting me come tonight. And I want to especially welcome those new council members. I'm really excited that we have some new faces on council. I have to admit that I'm kind of have some mixed feelings about the whole election. There were some things that I think were really great that came out of the election, and I have some disappointment as well. I think, you know, after council started, one of the most disappointing things for me is Council Member Levison, who's not here right now, has been on council for, well, more than 6 years now. And I was really surprised when she didn't make it as Mayor Pro Tem. I thought that would be kind of an obvious thing. She's always been one of the most studious council members here and studied all the issues and really did a great job, I thought. And I have nothing against you, Bagley. Just close. Don't misunderstand me or anything like that. Because I think you've done some really great things. But I guess I do have one disappointment. You know, one of the things that you ran on as a council member and bragged about was how much you would communicate with your constituents. And I've had some people in Ward 1 say that their emails don't get returned, and recently a few phone calls I've tried to get to you haven't been returned, and so I'm not as convinced as I was early on, where you were very diligent about that this was going to be your big commitment, and I think you should really stick with that. So I guess that was the other reason I was a little disappointed that Levison didn't make it to Mayor Pro Tem, because of that. She seems to have been very good about responding to her constituents. But one of the reasons why I came here is I want to talk a little bit about the LFCPA. It seems like there's still some loopholes in that I find a little bit disappointing. And maybe I can just kind of quickly go through that. And I'm just using this as an example. And the only reason I'm using this particular one is because it is financially pretty prominent. I don't know, which one do I push to go forward? So if you're looking at this, I just did a sort of a representation of as an example. I'm not picking on you. Don't misunderstand me, Councilmember Santos. But the individual contributions is supposed to be $222, and then from any person other than a natural person. I'm not sure what that means, an unnatural person, or what that is, but I think that has something to do with the Supreme Court decision that made that possible to have an unnatural person. But as you can see here from the diagram, you can take a single person like Wendell Pickett and have these 3 different organizations and then accumulate $1,600 and then give it to a particular council member. And I think this really biases some of the council votes. So,
Your 3 minutes is up.
Okay. Well, thank you. I'll come back and speak some other time. Thank you.
I just have one question.
Yeah, he's the only one. Go ahead, Councilmember Bradley.
Yeah, I just have one question. Have you gotten a voicemail yet?
I don't think I did.
No, what I mean, do you have voicemail on your phone
yes,
yet?
I do.
Okay, just check.
Oh, yeah, you can definitely leave a message. That's been the case for some time now.
All right, just check it.
Yeah.
It wasn't the case a couple weeks ago.
Oh, no, there was a case a few months ago, even a couple of years ago, so I would disagree with you on that. You can try it.
Okay, do you want to introduce the first items on, let's see, that's the end of, that's the only person we have to sign up for, so I'm going to close first call public invited to be heard.
Right, so now it's second reading of ordinances and public hearings. The first one has 3 ordinances. I'll read all 3 titles. Ordinance 2013-66 is a bill for an ordinance making additional appropriations for the expenses and liabilities of the City of Longmont for the fiscal year beginning January 1st, 2013. Ordinance 2013-67 is a bill for an ordinance amending the 2013-2017 capital improvement program. And ordinance 2013-68 is a bill for an ordinance amending 14.42 of the Longmont Municipal Code on art and public places. All 3 of these ordinances are flood related, and there was information provided before, so there is no formal staff presentation.
Okay, I'll open the public hearing on ordinance 2013-66. Is there anyone from the audience that'd like to speak at this time?
Hi, my name's Cynthia Campbell. I live at 1104 8th Avenue in Longmont, and I'm really nervous doing this. I thank you to the Times Call for covering this agenda item this evening. I just want to speak out against I would like to ask that this nearly $3 million expense to purchase the mobile home park be delayed. I would like to know a lot more about this. It seems kind of a rush decision to me, just as we've lived in Longmont for 30 years, and I know that everyone who had floodwater either destroy their homes or damage a portion, this flood created misery for a lot of people. And so that's not, I don't mean to discount that, what happened to everyone who lives in this mobile home park, but this is such a great amount of money. When I read the story in the Times Call, I thought, what about the homeowners and business owners who live west of this location who were under floodwater? And
Well, right now, we're talking about ordinance 2013-66, which is the bill for an ordinance making,
Ma'am, the Royal Mobile Home purchase is a little later in the agenda.
yeah.
I'm sorry, what?
It's a little later in the agenda.
Why is, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, why
Yeah.
is it on the
Yeah, let's take it off the screen. That was,
screen? I'm sorry.
oh,
I'm embarrassed.
oh, no problem.
What should I do, sit down and,
Yeah, when we get to, let's see, that's going to be though on consent agenda. Okay, so yeah. Yeah, you won't be able, you can speak at final call, public invited to be heard on that item.
but, I'm sorry, you spoke about public hearing opens, or I'm confused?
Well, we have
It's
first call
actually
public
part
invited.
of, it's actually part of the appropriation as well.
Okay,
So it can, that is one of the items that was included in the appropriation in the first reading, so that it can be discussed in that public hearing.
okay. Continue, we'll handle it right now.
Okay, what was,
Okay,
I'll hurry. I'm, again, whatever, property owners who were west of this specific property, the river was running north and south of a lot of homes and businesses, west and east of Maine. I can't say I'm that familiar with it, but I saw a lot. I just wonder, I don't question I can't remember the line item to help the residents in the mobile home park with help they need for living expenses or whatever. I don't question that, but I just question buying this specific property. I just question the rapidity of the decision. I think that a lot of the area near this mobile home park is going to be all involved in the future transit park. So there would be a lot of changes going on in that area anyway. I just question this expenditure. Also, I'm in beat 11. The Longmont Police Department has this in different beats around the city. Most recent crime map, long list of vandalism in my neighborhood. I would love to see some of this money, I guess that is sitting in the fleet fund, transferred to more patrol cars out on patrol.
okay, thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Is there anybody else that'd like to speak on ordinance 2013-66-13? Okay, seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing on that item. Councilmember Finley.
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. I'd like to move ordinance 2013-66.
Second.
All right, it's been moved in second. Councilmember Santos?
Thank you, Mayor. It might be appropriate for the audience member, if she has questions that in the consent agenda, apparently it's going to be pulled, that she might want to stay and listen to the presentation regarding that topic. So it'll be coming up a little bit later.
Okay, I'll open the public hearing on, oh, excuse me, yes, I've got to vote. Yes. Get ahead of myself. Brian? Got to vote. Okay, it passes 6-0. Councilmember Levison absent. Okay, I'll now open the public hearing on ordinance 2013-67. Is there anyone from the audience that'd like to speak on that item right now? Seeing no one, I'll close public hearing on ordinance 2013-67. Councilmember Santos.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd move ordinance 2013-67.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Let's vote. Okay, that passes 6-0 with Councilmember Levison absent. Okay, I'll open the public hearing on ordinance 2013-68. Is there anyone from the audience who'd like to speak on this agenda item at this time? Okay, seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing. Councilmember Finley.
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. I'd like to move ordinance 2013-68.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Let's vote. That passes 6-0 with Councilmember Levison absent.
Mayor Coombs, the next item on your agenda is your consent agenda. Item 9A is ordinance 2013-70, a bill for an ordinance making additional appropriations for the expenses and liabilities for the city of Longmont for the fiscal year beginning January 1st, 2013. Public hearing and second reading scheduled for December 10th. 9B is ordinance 2013-71, a bill for an ordinance amending the 2013-2017 capital improvement program. Public hearing and second reading scheduled for December 10th. Item 9C is two ordinances that have to do with budget. First one is ordinance 2013-72, a bill for an ordinance repealing ordinance 2013-57 and adopting the budget for the city of Longmont for the year 2014. And item 9C2 is ordinance 2013-73, a bill for an ordinance repealing ordinance 2013-58 and making appropriations for the expenses and liabilities of the city of Longmont for the fiscal year beginning January 1st, 2014. Public hearing and second reading on both these ordinances is scheduled for December 10th. Item 9D is ordinance 2013-74, a bill for an ordinance amending chapter 14.36 of the Longmont Municipal Code on Park Fund and land for municipal uses. Public hearing and second reading scheduled for December 10th. Item 9E is ordinance 2013-75, a bill for an ordinance authorizing a lease agreement between the city of Longmont as lessee and the Archdiocese of Denver as lessor for use of the St. John the Baptist Church parking lot for Longmont city employee parking. Public hearing and second reading scheduled for December 10th, 2013. Item 9F is ordinance 2013-76, a bill for an ordinance conditionally approving the Bachman annexation, generally located along County Road 20.5, east of County Line Road, and zoning the property A agriculture. Public hearing and second reading scheduled for December 17th, 2013. Item 9G is ordinance 2013-77, a bill for an ordinance establishing a charge of 50 cents per month for emergency telephone service 911 for wired and wireless subscribers in Longmont for the first 6 months of calendar year 2014 and 75 cents for the last 6 months of calendar year 2014. Public hearing and second reading is scheduled for December 10th. 9H is Resolution 2013-113, a resolution of the City Council approving the intergovernmental agreement between the city and the City of Boulder for a cost-share agreement for the use of downloadable digital media. Item 9I is Resolution 2013-114, approving the intergovernmental agreement between the city and the State of Colorado for grant funding for the Longmont Public Library. 9J is Resolution 2013-115, authorizing an agreement between the City and Royal Park Partnership, LLP, for the purchase of real property known as the Royal Mobile Home Park property. Item 9K is approve and authorize the mayor to sign 2014 contracts with the Longmont Area Economic Council and the Boulder Small Business Development Center. And staff would like you to pull items 9F and J for short presentations.
Councilmember Finley.
Thank you, Member Mayor Coombs. I'd like to move the consent agenda minus items F and J.
Second.
Okay, let's vote. That passes 6-0 with Councilmember Levison absent.
Okay, item 9F, again, is the Bachman annexation ordinance, 2013-76, and Brad Skoll has a short presentation on that.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Brad Skoll, Special Projects Manager for the City of Longmont. And this evening, before you, we have the Bachman annexation. It's a 2.5-acre parcel, which is located on County Road 20.5. It's adjacent to open space property owned by the City of Longmont. In this instance, the city is using the annexation and subdivision process to reconcile some property line and driveway issues between the private property owner and the city's open space. Property is surrounded by the Sherwood open space on the north, east, and west sides, unincorporated Weld County on the south. This property is unincorporated in Boulder County. A little aerial graphic that you have before you shows a small green square in the middle of the property. You can see the driveway coming off Road 20 and a half that comes through the eastern portion of the property. That driveway is jointly used by the oil company that accesses a well to the north of this property. It's also used by the farmer who leases the city property, and it will also be the residence access when a single-family home is constructed on this property. So the aim of the annexation and subdivision is to get these access points separated so the public access can be further to the east, and the individual private access will be at the point shown on the property. This is a snapshot capture of the proposed subdivision. The smaller rectangular parcel that's comprised of lots 1 and 2 is the existing 2.5 acre parcel that Ken and Rana Bachman own in Weld County. The square parcel that you see to the up and to the left of it is the reconfigured property. The two boxes are approximately the same in their area. However, the reconfigured box, or the square, will permit the access to be in what's shown as Lot 2 now, and that's going to be the city property. And then the private residence access will be on the square in Block 1.
So you're saying that Lot 1 and Lot 2 in area is equal to the square?
Yeah, they end up both being about 3 acres. Okay. So the City of Longmont is processing an annexation. We have first reading this evening. We had a resolution for eligibility a few weeks ago. There will be a public hearing on the eligibility and the compliance for state statutes on December 17th. And second reading of the annexation ordinance will be done at that time. After this is completed and then the subdivision is recorded with Weld County, according to the terms of a pre-annexation agreement that the city executed with Mr. and Mrs. Bachman in December of 2010, then the city will de-annex the property and Mr. Bachman can construct the residence in unincorporated Weld County. Because the remote location of this property as a single-family residence, it's impractical to extend city services as would be required by annexation. The extension of water and electric to this property would be prohibitively expensive and probably not a practical extension of city utilities. So consequently, the property would receive services from those existing service providers. Mountain View Fire Protection is on County Line Road, about a quarter mile away. This is within the jurisdiction area of United Power, as well as Left Hand Water. Those would be the service providers. So at the conclusion of the de-annexation, Mr. Bachman can proceed with the process of applying for his single-family residence permit in Weld County. If council has any questions, I'd be happy to answer those at this time.
Councilmember Moore. Brad, are there going to be any additional construction costs required to complete this access?
Mayor Coombs, council members, and Councilmember Moore, there probably will be a small amount of construction associated with placing a culvert and a drive over at the existing location. And our open space anticipates that expense.
From what fund?
The Open Space Fund. I might also mention, council members, that as an inducement to this annexation and reconfiguration, the property owner is conveying a conservation easement to the city in keeping with the conservation efforts and open space preservation in the area to limit the aggregate construction square footage on the property to 15,000 square feet.
Any further questions? Councilmember Bagley.
I move that we pass 9K, or I'm sorry, 9F.
I'll second that. Let's vote. Passes 6-0 with Councilmember Levison absent.
Mayor Coombs, the next item pulled from your agenda was Resolution 2013, which has to do with the purchase of the Royal Mobile Home Park. And Harold Dominguez will be making this presentation.
Actually, I'm going to be starting the presentation. I want to introduce this topic. As we've been going through this process, Sean and Dale have been actually working on this together. One of the things that, as you will see from some of the slides, the discussion on this property has actually started a couple of years ago. So in keeping the continuity of the conversation with the owners of the Royal Mobile Home Park, I asked Dale to work with Sean on this project as we were transitioning in this. And so the two of them worked on it collectively, and Dale will start the presentation off.
Mayor Combs and members of council, and Dale Rademacher, Director of Public Works and Natural Resources. And I think one of the basic and first questions, and this will also help the citizen, I think that also came down to speak, was, so why is the city buying the property? Well, we're not buying the property necessarily to help the homeowners that lived in the mobile home park, although that might be a good reason to buy it. The city is buying the property because we have identified a need through the 2008 Anderson study to increase the width of the St. Vrain River in order to pass a 100-year floodway, a flood through that area. In essence, the channel needs to be widened. It needs to be widened to around 300 feet at the top of the channel, and that takes additional land adjacent to the river. What that study identified, again, back in 2008, is that the best way to reconfigure between Pratt and Main is to enlarge the channel to the north. And that takes about 2/3 of this property in order to accomplish that. So it meets the long-term flood needs of the city in order to begin that work. Since the 2008 study, the city has already bought the property immediately to the east of this site that fronts out onto Main Street. It's where the veterinarian clinic is right now. We bought that property a couple of years ago, I think back in 2010. Same purpose, because we know we're going to need that property. We're also going to need the property on Main Street when we widen the bridge and extend that bridge to the north. So the city is contemplating massive capital projects in this area of the city over the next several years. The first steps you have to take is to hopefully work with property owners and come to an agreement to acquire their property. We believe we've reached that in our discussions at this point. The other key reason, and basic reason again, is basic public safety. That's probably one of the major charges of the city, is to protect the public and to protect not only people but private property from flooding. Granted, the acquisition of this property alone will not solve the problem, but it is a key piece of ground in the first stages of the work on the St. Vrain that needs to occur. Obviously, after the September 2013 flood, the situation changed. But what didn't change was our need and interest to buy this property. We've been talking with the property owners for the last year or two. Frankly, we didn't have the funds, nor did we have the sense of urgency and need to move like we do today. And I think, Council, you pretty well directed us with some of the decisions you've made on the Storm Drainage Fund and on the capital program to say now's the time to move forward. I think the other thing that's unique today that didn't exist 2 years ago and may not exist a year from now is the impact on the residents that live there. They have been impacted. All but maybe 9 or 10 of the residents have decided to move to other locations. And so the displacement of the residents has occurred. And that's a huge issue, I think, in people's lives, because it is their homes that we're dealing with. It's a horrible situation that it happened, but nonetheless, it's the situation we have today, which is very different than what we had a year or two ago, and I believe could be different than what we would have if we were not to acquire the property expeditiously at this point. And so I think there's several drivers, but again, the key one is it's been identified as a property that we've needed to acquire for a number of years. And so, you know, the map that we have up here sort of shows the floodway. And what was interesting here is that the flood came at them predominantly from the north. The river had breached the channel to the west, and it came across South Pratt Parkway to the north of them, came across Boston Avenue and into the park. Again, the river had already breached over by Isaac Walton Pond, and it was coming over the pond. You know, this is an aerial photograph that I believe we got from Digital Globe a day or two after the flood, essentially showing that it's all inundated. But you will notice on the far right side of the photograph, Main Street right there was dry, as was some of I think it's Essex Motors is sitting right there. A couple of those properties were dry, but where this mobile home park is sitting is clearly underwater. It was under several feet of water. The other interesting thing is that it was not in a situation that maybe some of the other mobile home parks are that you saw out in the Evans area, for instance, where the velocity of the flow and the depth of flow coming through those mobile home parks was of a nature that it literally picked up the trailers and moved them all to one end of the site. That didn't happen here. And so the other thing that didn't happen here is it didn't damage the underlying infrastructure of the property like it could have in another situation. Imagine if it had cut gouges down to the ground, disrupting utilities and disrupting the roads and that kind of damage. That didn't necessarily happen here. And so the slide here shows the area in red is the area, again, that was identified in the 2008 Anderson study that we need to acquire, and that's about 3.67 acres of the overall property. The 2.35 piece of ground to the north, again, is a piece of property that would be acquired as part of this acquisition, but it wouldn't necessarily be the city's intent to hold on to that property in the long term. We believe that once we finish the river corridor planning study and initiate the drainage work in the area, thereby freeing up this ground for higher and better use, that could be a piece of ground that the city of Longmont would look to either partner with a developer or partner with an adjacent landowner in order to come up with a different riverfront than what you might have today. Again, future planning. In the interim, the land would be left vacant. We'd probably overseed it with grass. It would simply be left as a vacant piece of ground at this point. In the red area is not all just drainage way as well. It's also where we're going to reestablish the greenway. So the greenway is going to come into this section as well as we rebuild and widen the channel. So with that, I think I'll turn it over to Sean to talk about some of the details.
If I can jump in real quick, a couple of points that I want to make and really reiterate what Dale said is, one, this is not something that, because of the flood, we just decided to do. This is something that actually has been part of the Anderson study since 2008. There have been discussions prior to that. The flood just kind of increased the pace on the discussions, but we have been working on this for a number of years. And what Dale also highlighted in this conversation is as we work on increasing the capacity of the St. Vrain River area and deal with stormwater issues, you essentially try to work from downstream up. So you can have that capacity building as you move upstream. And as you do that, what it ends up doing is not only taking some of this area out of the floodplain, but it takes that larger area of residential and commercial development out of the floodplain, and hopefully helps them avoid potentially going through something like this in the future.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. Sean Lewis, Assistant City Manager. Just wanted to share a few photos of the park with you and actually reiterate some of the points that Dale made with regard to the condition of the park. I think that there is probably some misconception that the park was destroyed in the flood, and so we did want to show you some shots showing certainly, you know, mud, dirt, a lot of underpinning that's gone. But for instance, this photo, which was taken right after the flood, actually, this particular home is occupied, and I think a few of these homes right here closest to the river are reoccupied already. You can also see, as Dale mentioned, that many of the homes, the vast majority of the homes, were not moved in any way. They stayed on the pads, on the foundations. You can see even the carports, some of those structures stayed. And while there was a lot of devastation in this park, again, it wasn't to the level that repairs could not have been made and the park restored as a mobile home park. In addition, the utilities, most of the utilities that you can see, some of which are illustrated here, remained intact. And really that, as the appraisal points out, is really where the value lies, is the fact that the pads were, for the most part, not damaged beyond the point of repair, that the utilities were in place, that the roads remain relatively stable, et cetera. So with that, we'll talk a little bit about the appraisal. I did draw the short stick in getting this particular subject, but I did want to just start by explaining the method in which the property was appraised. There are a number of ways to appraise commercial property. For a property like this, an income-producing property, the industry standard for that is the income capitalization method, and so that's the method that you see. In addition to that, though, the appraiser did also do a sales comparison method, and so that's also in your background information and ended up virtually the same as the income.
One quick question on that. Your post-flood, you have the 2.1 million. The appraisal had 2.18. I was just wondering why you rounded down instead of rounding up.
I apologize. That probably should say then 2.2.
Yeah. Okay.
I just was using the first number that was after the 2, so my apologies on that. So the city did request, at the time that we requested the appraisal, we requested a post-flood and a pre-flood valuation. I might mention that our appraiser, who has done most of the appraisals on mobile home parks along the Front Range between Fort Collins and Denver anyway, was very uncomfortable with what we were asking. This is an extremely difficult piece of property to appraise because of the condition that we find it in, although he certainly agreed to do that, and we think gave us a good product. We do want to pass along his hesitancy because there are not examples that you can look at of destroyed mobile home parks, which are unique in and of themselves, much less when they've been destroyed. So there are 56 units in the rural mobile home park. There were annual cash flow of that, about $254,000, which gave that $2.6 million using that income-based approach for the pre-flood appraisal. Post-flood appraisal, came in at $2.1 million, and that was based on an estimated 28 pads, that should say pads rather than units, but that would not be reoccupied. And so I want to talk a little bit about that. And really some complicating factors with the post-flood value that, as Harold and I even today spoke with the appraiser about, that he verified some of these complicating factors. So that number of pad assumptions, again, that assumption was that only 28 pads would be reoccupied post-flood. However, 56, not 28 pads can be reoccupied. And as Dale mentioned, those pads still exist. There are only 8 of those pads that really have some minor to moderate erosion of the surface material right around portions of those pads that would simply have to be refilled and compacted, but would not be substantial in cost. The street infrastructure, as mentioned before, is also appears to be sound, with some minor fill that would have to go on there. And utility infrastructure has been completely reconnected on these facilities. So again, this is where the value is in the park, and the income-producing value of the park is in the fact that these components still exist. I'll also mention that the appraisal itself indicates that the entire park could be, in essence, rehabbed in terms of the portions of the park, not the homes themselves, but rehab for about $50,000. So I know we've heard some numbers thrown around that number we think is much larger, but actually because these circumstances exist with the minimal damage in some cases, that number is really only about $50,000 to get the whole park back up and running.
Sean, let me jump in. Actually, if in the appraisal, when he talks, it's in the section of deferred maintenance. The appraiser actually includes interior repair of an equipment shed, mold remediation, repair to site improvements / streets, repairs to pad sites, and debris removal. And he's estimating that the total of that repair cost to be $50,000, and that is included in the appraisal.
So the next kind of complicating factor with regard to this post-flood value are the regulatory limits that we have here in Longmont. This is somewhat unique to us, but we have found that many communities have the same problem with mobile home parks in that there's really not a lot in the existing building code or in floodplain regulations that would make restoring a park after it's been severely damaged impossible. So in essence, the assumption was that totaled pads could not be replaced with a new home or existing homes that they could not be renovated on those 28 that he assumed were kind of too far gone to renovate. However, our building codes, as our legal department confirmed and our building official confirmed, the building codes do not apply in mobile home parks. The reason that this is a complicating factor is because had the building codes, if we could apply the building codes to the mobile home park, we could have, there are ways that you can prevent unnecessary alteration or inappropriate alteration, alteration without an engineer seal involved with that. But again, because building codes do not apply, we don't have that same regulatory control that we would have in a stick-built home in any other part of town. And then secondly, the floodplain regulations only require homes to be 2 foot above the base flood elevation. So if the owners of the park had wanted to, they could have gone back into the park, replaced damaged homes, and simply just ensured and verified to us, the city, that they had were setting the homes 2 foot above the 100-year flood base flood elevation. And as Dale, as the floodplain administrator, has indicated, all of the units in the park today already comply with that regulation. So again, it would have been impossible for us to say you can't bring in a new home, you can't renovate the existing homes. And so in some ways, the owners of the park, because we were negotiating with them to buy this park, really they decided to forego all of the improvements that they would have otherwise made to go ahead and restore the park fully. The next topic that we wanted to cover is why we're using storm drainage funds versus federal funds. And this is a question that's been asked because, of course, our storm drainage funds are local funds as opposed to federal funds such as FEMA or CDBG, DR, disaster recovery funds. So the first reason for that is that there are no restrictions on future use of the remnant parcel. Remember that green piece, the 2.35 acres? That piece, had we used FEMA to purchase this property, would have been deed restricted in perpetuity to have no development on it. It's questionable whether you can even put a parking lot on a piece of property that's been acquired by FEMA for flood mitigation purposes. Secondly, the FEMA funds would take 6 months and possibly even up to a year to go ahead and get through the system, and there was no guarantee that they would have even qualified for this particular project. And so that was also something that was unacceptable to owners who were sitting with a property that was no longer producing income, and we were really insisting that they hold off on making any repairs until we had these negotiations kind of in place.
Let me jump in, Sean. On the FEMA funds that he's talking about in terms of utilizing to purchase this property, those are FEMA 404 mitigation funds. And so the way that those funds are generated, they basically take the estimated dollar amounts of damage in the entire disaster, and they're still, I think, calculating that number, and then they apply a percentage to it, and that's actually what determines the $404. Those $404 then go to the state, and then it is a competitive process in terms of applying for those dollars for the programs. And so we haven't really talked a lot about the mitigation dollars and what that really looks like and how it works. So I wanted to throw that in.
Just one quick question. That green triangle that we're talking about, the 2.32, once this project is done and you've mitigated the flood, will the value of that go way up? I mean, do we have the ability in the future to recoup potentially some of our investment?
That was actually part of the thought process when we looked at this, is that if you were to use the FEMA mitigation dollars, that property is a parking lot, a greenway, whatever it is, in perpetuity. Utilizing stormwater dollars, it gives you the ability to actually sell that piece of property and recoup some of your expense.
To give you an example of
Or partner on a private, or partner on something.
To give you an example of the, I think the interest in this property, when we were looking at using the FEMA 404 funds, and we knew that there would be kind of this delay in when we could do it, we were told by FEMA that we could actually go through a local housing agency to purchase the property on our behalf and then kind of do a swap when we got the grant, which again wasn't guaranteed, but that we could do the swap. I will tell you that that local housing agency was insistent that they have right of first refusal on the remnant parcel, because they definitely, because of the prime location with regard to the river, Main Street, downtown, etc., were very interested in, had we gone through that process, they were very interested in developing that property. So I do think that there will be some interest in this, particularly the ability to possibly assemble property in this area along with other pieces of property that we may need to buy for flood mitigation. So the next, or the second reason rather, that we decided to go with the Storm Drainage Fund was the fact that the use of FEMA or CDBG DR, that's Community Development Block Grant Funds, Disaster Recovery Funds, if we had have used those federally funded funds, that would require compliance with Uniform Relocation Act. And as you know, the Uniform Relocation Act is a federal requirement that requires communities, when they acquire property, to relocate people that are displaced by that acquisition within certain very strict guidelines. So one of the things that we wanted to make sure and point out is the fact that up to $1.5 million would have been needed to relocate the residents of this park had we used federal funds to purchase that. Under the scenario that we're looking at today, the maximum amount, and we think this is high based on the occupancy, both of these numbers are based on the 56 units, but it's up to $800,000 to relocate with local funds to purchase, because we aren't going to have to comply with Uniform Relocation Act. That said, we would be following as closely as we could all of the guidelines that really try to help and protect the rights of the residents. But at the same time, just the compliance with those regulations causes a nexus there of about $700,000 had we used federal funds. In addition, that $800,000, or as you budgeted tonight, actually, I think in your previous motion, $220,000, that can be refunded to us by CDBGR when we get the CDBGDR when we get those funds. And the third and last point is that $2.6 million of the purchase price, should that be what you authorize tonight, of those local funds can be used as a local match for a larger FEMA grant. So as Dale alluded to, we are looking at massive rechannelization along the St. Vrain. That will require a lot of federal funds. The FEMA 404 can be used for those funds, and we believe that this $2.6 million can be used as a match for those funds, and anticipate that happening.
Let me jump in on this topic as well, Sean. As we were moving through this discussion and really evaluating the various options in terms of how we deal with this property, one of the things that we started focusing on is that the 404 mitigation dollars and the DR dollars, to a certain extent, will be competitive. Unless we're able to get a direct allocation, we're still having those conversations, but that's definitely an uphill battle. Those are going to be competitive. And we started asking ourselves, do we want to have an application for $2.6 million for the purchase of property, and then have another application for a $10 million project or $7 million project in the area, and then another project for something else where we're actually competing against ourselves in the allocation process? And we really felt like we were potentially cutting our nose off to spite our face. And so as we look at the broader project in this area, what we've discussed is actually submitting a much larger project and then utilizing the purchase price of this grant as the match for that project. So we can count it there, and then at the same time we don't necessarily have the restrictions. So we're not potentially pitting one local project against another as we move forward.
If I could, just one thing to add to that, to remind the council, we are in the final stages of getting about a $3 million FEMA grant associated with the Main Street Bridge and the Pratt Street Bridge right in this area. We were on the phone with the folks from FEMA discussing that particular grant that's coming through. And what they informed us then was a couple key changes in their program policies going forward. One key change is that prior to now, you could only apply for these FEMA grants every 3 years. And so we got $3 million when we did the Left Hand Creek project, and then 3 years rolled, and now we're trying to get another $3 million on the St. Vrain. They've removed that restriction so that you can apply now every year. So that's a huge thing for us right now as we're getting ready to start the St. Vrain. The other one is that they've removed the cap. And so they used to cap these at $3 million. And so we might be able to come forward with a much more substantial project and leverage those dollars with federal dollars as well, which is what we've been talking with council about over the last few weeks. But for FEMA to have changed those policy parameters, I think is, I guess it's fortunate. We've been living right. It's good news for Longmont right now, because had that not happened, we would have had to again wait that 3-year cycle and be capped at $3 million. It's still the FEMA grant money, but it's not related directly to the flood, though.
Correct.
It's their national program.
Mayor, Council, the last and final slide, which was really direction that we received from the previous council, was make every effort to assist the residents. So I did want to just go over some of the efforts that we've done. I want to preface this by saying that the folks in community services, Kathy Fedler, John Clark, both of their divisions, Karen Roney, all have done yeoman's work in terms of doing everything within our power to help residents. We have received a lot of calls from other communities, seeing what we've done. So I just want to go over that. Our goal here, and two main goals. One, assist residents in receiving the maximum FEMA payout in order to assist them with relocation. So what we did first was try to obtain a condemnation order from the governor's office. This was a method that was used in Vermont. We're still pursuing that. We've gotten kind of yes and no answers, but we're back on track, we think, for possibly getting this. The reason why this would be important is if we can get a blanket condemnation order from the state on the home, not themselves, not the land per se, but on the homes, then that would automatically trigger the maximum payout from FEMA. And so we think that that is important. However,
let me jump in real quick. I think that's an important point. The homes are owned by the individuals who lived in each spot. They are going through the individual assistance component associated with FEMA. The property is completely separate from the mobile homes. And I think that at times gets mixed up. Those individuals own those mobile homes. They're actually considered personal property, and they're taxed through the county, I believe. Personal property.
And so the second thing, when we got an initial response from the state that would not be possible, we have started pursuing another avenue, which that is trying to determine that these homes have been substantially damaged. And the way that FEMA defines that is that if it costs more than 50% of the value of the home to repair the home, to make it occupiable or livable again, then that is considered substantially damaged. So what we've done is we've used CDBG dollars and some other funds internally to hire a contractor, an estimator, to go in and estimate the damage of each home. So the majority of homes have taken advantage of this service, and we've been able to compare that dollar amount of the cost damages, the cost to repair the homes, against the Boulder County value that's been placed on the homes, and then provide a letter to each homeowner saying that based on this criteria, the home is substantially damaged, and we would recommend that you not, make repairs to it and that you not reoccupy the home. So we've had kind of mixed success, but mostly failure in that arena too with FEMA. They've provided us with some other guidance, which we're currently going through, of maybe some ways we can tweak the letter, tweak the estimate, et cetera. But we have provided those letters, and a few people have been able to increase their dollar amount because they've appealed what they've gotten the first round from FEMA. They've taken our letter and used that to try to appeal the amount and then gotten more. So we've worked very hard to try to, and are still working on that particular goal. The second goal is to get residents really in a better living situation as soon as possible. So we have received the titles to 13 of the trailers that are in the park now that have received the full $31,000, which is the individual assistance max. They've received the full $31,000, and they've now turned over their title to the city, or in this case, our contractor, to haul the homes off and be disposed of in the landfill. We've also worked with Habitat for Humanity to come in and clean out appliances and anything of value that can be sold at the restore. So we've really partnered with a lot of agencies to try to do this. And then we also are in discussions with the current park manager to manage the operations through the winter, so that those 15 or so people that are currently living in the park, so that they have a manager that they know and who already knows the park, and we're trying to get them engaged so that they can go ahead and help us through the winter in particular, manage the park. And then lastly, we're preparing estimates for offering that optional relocation assistance that you guys actually passed in the budget a few minutes ago. We've actually already started looking at each individual homeowner and preparing an estimate of what they would get in optional relocation assistance. So that's the end of the presentation. I'm sure you have questions on a number of topics, so we can move back and forth between the slides.
I just have a quick question for Dale Rademacher. When we flew over the city after the flood, I'm not a hydrologist, but the conclusion I got is if the river did not breach out of the channel up by the Cemex plant, that the Royal Park would have been hammered much, much worse than it really was. It was actually, the fact that championship greens and stuff got hit actually helped, probably maybe even save lives at the Royal. Is that, your take on?
Mayor and members of council, I do believe that a lot of the energy of the flood was released west of the city as it breached into those gravel ponds and spread out, several miles or a mile or so wide west of the city. That certainly did take away a lot of that energy and force. And you're correct that had it stayed channeled, if you will, with the current channel configuration, I might add, you would have seen higher velocities and probably greater depth near and adjacent to the river, thereby probably resulting in, frankly, trailers being moved and floating down the river. So do I think that could have happened? Yes. And I think the breaching of the river did take away a lot of the force and the flow of the water and dispersed it.
Thank you. Councilmember Finley.
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. I really do appreciate that the staff has gone above and beyond in making sure that the residents of this park are taken care of. That's certainly my main concern. I think I said at one point I didn't give a rip about this worthless piece of land, hence my concern about the $2.6 million price tag for what seems to, that, it's not worth that now. I understand that at some point a piece of it could be worth more than it is now, and that we need the land for the flood mitigation. I understand that. I still have some concern with that $2.6 million price tag. I have had several calls from people who understand commercial property, and they too think that's too much money for that piece of land. So that's my main concern, is that I get what we're trying to do, and I know we need to do it, but gosh, that's a lot of money for that worthless piece of land.
Could I help with that? Maybe not help, but so I share that same concern. I'm known to be fairly cheap and ask my staff. But as I look at things and sort of run that calculus over in my head, and you advance this forward 3 months, 6 months, 1 year to the time when we might be actually building a project, I have no doubt of the ability of these current owners to rehabilitate and reoccupy the park to a full 56 or even more if they decide to try to put more trailers into that particular site. I believe it can be done. I believe it can be done fairly expeditiously, given the lack of damage to the infrastructure. Again, had the utilities been washed out, had the sewers been taken out, the water line, and then I would have paused and said, boy, this is going to be a real challenge to try to get this reopened. I don't think that's the situation we have. I think what we have are owners that are also at a point in their life where they frankly are interested in not staying in the business necessarily. And so they, had the flood not happen, they probably would have ran the park another 4 or 5 years, waited for the city to come along and build the widened channel. So I think the opportunity that we have is that we have a park that is largely vacant at this point. We have a park owners who are very interested and willing to sell. They have sustained some damage. There's no disputing that to their land. I think it can be rehabilitated without a huge amount of work or cost. And I believe, I think it's just the time. And so I think we will pay $2.6 million or more 3 months, 6 months, or a year from now. If we choose not to act now, I don't foresee a situation where the price will come down. If I did, I'd say, hold your money and wait this out for a year. I actually see it could turn around the other way, and we could be faced not only with paying $2.6 million or more, but also then redisplacing people that might choose to try to relocate there.
So my question is on that same point. Let's say we didn't do this thing now, but we waited 3 years from now, like the flood didn't happen. But then we'd have the expense. Let's say we bought the property for $2.62 million 3 years from now, or whatever it's worth it. But then we'd have the additional expense at that point of moving 56 trailers, which would be pretty significant too. So we're kind of avoiding that cost. Councilmember Begley.
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. I would like to thank my fellow council members who, we didn't talk, but I thank you anyway, Councilmember Moore. This is a difficult issue. I've had several conversations, spent some time running numbers and whatnot, and I have a couple comments, and then potential discussion with my fellow council members, Councilmember Finley. I also had the same concern, the $2.6 million. And I don't have that anymore, though, and here's why. First of all, I think that we've used eminent domain, here locally, and I'm a big believer, contrary to what many people have said. I personally am a big believer in not taking people's land unless it's absolutely necessary, and paying fair market value for it. And unlike the Dillard scenario, where there's question as to what can the land be used for, how much money will it generate, is the mall going to be good or bad, here, and I take a little bit of exception, I'm going to correct your math a little bit, because I didn't quite read the appraisal the way I think city staff did. But my understanding is the $2.6 million price tag assumed a vacancy rate of 5%, or 2.8 empty lots, Whereas the $2.1 million price tag wasn't assuming a 50% vacancy, it was a 15% vacancy rate. And so we've talked about this, that we know that there's demand for mobile homes in Longmont. And I don't have any doubt that if we were to say, nah, go ahead and build your mobile homes, within the next 12 months, they could put mobile homes on that property. So right now, if you look at the full appraisal, I did the math, but then I found a bunch of checks in the back which substantiate that the average price to rent those pads are $427 a month. And so if you look at $427 per pad with 56 units, that means if it's operating at full capacity, 100%, all 56 units, they will be generating a gross income of $286,870. So if you go off the 2 to 3% vacancy rate, which my understanding is that it was pretty full, it was full. So 100% occupancy rate. But if you just use their appraised value, where they're assuming the 2.8 or 3 pads are vacant, they're bringing in $272,527 a year. And if you use a cap rate of 8%, which is basically it's a very lazy person's way. No offense to all the real estate agents out there, but it's a lazy person's way to basically say, what's my return every year on the money? And so if you assume an 8% cap rate at a 5% occupancy rate, and if the city pays $2.6 million, even if we don't take into account the cost of the land, appreciation of the land, the city, if we chose to continue running it as a mobile home park, we'll be able to recoup our money in 12 and a half years and still sell the entire thing. And so in the beginning, I was like, what the heck are we doing paying $2.6 million for this piece of, as I was quoted in the paper, it's only good for widening the trench. But when you start looking at the land, they could technically put mobile homes on there right now, and we couldn't stop them, even though it's dangerous. And then if another flood hits, they could, be literally up the creek or down the creek. So I think 2.6, when I ran the numbers, as you started reading the appraisal, like it or not, I think it's a fair price, assuming, again, that they can put mobile home parks there at the same price that they're getting. They don't have to do a whole lot of work because it's land. People just bring their mobile homes and just park them there. So I was prepared today to come in after I asked for this full appraisal to come in and bake staff, But in running the math, just from unless the numbers are wrong and the checks are false, and I'm not getting my math right, 2.62 is
Your math is right. I ran the same math.
Yeah. So anyway, those are just those are my thoughts. So I've got one question, and that's it. And I couldn't find it in the couple of hours before because I don't do this for a living. My question is, what is the average cap rate for apartments, multifamily units, specifically mobile home parks in Longmont? Why is the cap rate 8%?
Mayor Coombs, Mayor Pro Tem Bagley. Interestingly, if you looked at the comparables that this appraiser used for the cap rate, the average cap rate is 7.4.
We'll take 8. Thank you.
Exactly. The owners of the park really were not happy with that cap rate, and when we pressed the appraiser for why he chose the cap rate of 8, which was better for the city, worse for the seller, he essentially came back to because it's in a floodplain and because it's been flooded before. But again, we were asking him to appraise pre-flood value, and there had not been a flood before, and he still used 8. So the 8 was to our advantage and actually made the price come in a bit lower.
Thank you.
Councilmember Santos. Thank you, Mayor. Well, you both answered one of my questions. Can the owners repair and reopen? Yes. Dale, and you mentioned in the meeting that I wasn't at, but my wife, who works for a water district, you answered a question. You had a question and answered it with one of the congressional members. How concerned are you with the spring flows of 2014?
what is today? So on November 26th, I'm very concerned. And the reason we're concerned is because there is a substantial amount of granular gravel debris that is blocking the flow of the channel in a number of areas between here and Lyons and even through the city. And I think it's imperative that we work as expeditiously as we can to create enough capacity within that river channel to at least carry the spring runoff, which we have agreed with FEMA and the Corps of Engineers is around 2,400 CFS, which is nowhere near a 100-year flood, guys. That's a normal runoff. It's a little higher than normal. It's probably like a 5-year storm. We are working, though, very well with the county. We've also recently just got news that NRCS is actually going to get some funding into Colorado, somewhere in the neighborhood of $19 million. And we are wanting to try to position Longmont to get that money. And again, that comes back to our local match. That comes back to us trying to use our local funds to garner these federal dollars. But I'm concerned about it, to answer your question. But we're not sitting back and not doing anything. We are working to try to do everything we can to prevent another flood.
So basically, if we don't approve this and we dilly-dally and we wait till this, the potential spring runoff, and we allow the owners to rebuild, we could be in the same scenario we were in September. Worst case scenario.
Worst case scenario, you could be experiencing another flood. I'm very bad at making predictions, though, guys. And Lord knows I don't want there to be another flood.
Of course, I don't think any of us do.
I do think we have an opportunity to act and to move forward with plans that we've worked on for a number of years, and to stay the course with moving forward on that.
And one last question for you: if we were to approve this, how soon would we acquire this property and begin construction?
Currently, we have the closing date set for the last week of December. So our plan is to close on the property before the end of the year, should you approve the contract tonight.
And construction would begin?
So the construction, again, it's going to be a phased construction, guys. The first work we're going to be doing is the bridges. And this is part of assembling the property, though, so that we can now move forward with a more formal design. But we will still need to get additional funding in place in the form of potential additional storm sewer bonds in order to go to actual construction, start channelizing and widening the river. And that's an issue that I think we're going to bring back to you in the first quarter of 2014. And have those discussions with you, and then again get your direction on how to best move forward with that issue as well.
And frankly, from my perspective, what I would like to do is, as Dale talked about, assembling the land actually lets us move into design. But the other thing that assembling the land allows us to do is start putting together those projects that we can start pushing in the pipeline for the 404 mitigation dollars, other FEMA grants, and like the process of recovery in terms of getting the worksheets in, where we want to be at the front of the line. I want to be at the front of the line in terms of these projects, so they're ready to go, and we stand a better chance of getting that funding. So it really allows us to do a couple of things.
Understood. Thank you.
Councilmember Moore. Well, I just have a comment, and I think it's has a lot to do with the timing of the flood, and we were already in negotiations. And the property owner, if they were to rebuild, would have to invest money right away. And this gives them a way to get out of that, for us to close on the deal and acquire the property, as well as for them to be able to move on with their longer-term plans. I see this also as a long-term opportunity for the city and looking forward beyond taking advantage of it now rather than jumping in later. And so I'm supporting this idea.
Thank you, Mayor. Dale, just one quick question. I saw Councilmember Moore's light on, so I just stopped. I see Councilmember Christensen's now on. Can you remind me what the estimated CFS for the runoff of the flood? the estimate, because I know that the monitors were broken.
So during the flood, we have estimated, and again, I always caution that I want to wait for the sort of the formal hydrologist to weigh in, but we estimate that the flow at Lyons was anywhere from 17 to 20,000 CFS coming down the St. Vrain. Normal runoff, peak runoff is around 2,000. I think it's by far probably the highest gauged flow that's occurred on the river.
Councilmember Christensen.
I do think this is a wonderful opportunity for us to take, and we've already been pursuing it for a long time. I agree that it's, with Councilmember Finley, that it's a lot of money, but I do think that Mayor Pro Tem Bagley has looked at it very closely, and this acquisition will enable us to tie together Main Street and really complete a process, a design process that we've been thinking about for a long time that'll really add to the city. So I suggest supporting it.
Councilmember Santos.
Thank you, Mayor. I move Resolution 2013-115.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Let's vote. Okay, passes 6-0 with Councilmember Levison absent.
Mayor Coombs, members of council, the next item on your agenda is your discussion regarding the board and commission interview plan. And before you start your discussion, I just want to explain a couple of things. When you were making appointments to boards and committee as liaisons last week, we talked about the Visit Longmont position, and we had an opening that we had been advertising for. Well, since that discussion, we found out that former council member Alex Samori did not want to continue as the council appointee, and so, but does still want to be on LAVA, so LAVA has appointed him to another position, small business owner position or something. So his position did come open. We had not yet talked to the applicant that we had at that time, and so you still have a position that's open on Visit Longmont, and that applicant's has been added to the list of people to interview. So that's an update there. Then we gave you you gave us a lot of different ideas last time, so we put together a couple of options, and since then, Councilmember Moore presented another thought to me, so I laid some additional options at your desk tonight. The General Employee Retirement Board has 9 applicants, and that board meets about quarterly, and they don't have anything really scheduled for a while yet, so we could put those interviews off and take them off your plate in December, so we could do those in January. We also looked at the Visit Longmont, because that term does not end until January 31st, so you could put that one off until January. Golf, we added Golf Advisory Board because they don't meet until the 21st of January. You wouldn't have anybody there for the December meeting, but that's just one more meeting, and they would still be okay with a quorum. So you could put off these additional boards that we highlighted in yellow that we placed at your desk tonight till January. General Employee Retirement, Golf Advisory, and Visit Longmont. Those interviews. And then that would allow you to increase your interview time, or keep it at 10 minutes, interview as a panel, and still get all the interviews done in an 8-hour day. You would really have to, stay to your schedule, but you could still do that. We also suggested, though, to help you do that, reducing the time to 7 minutes for those less competitive boards. And what we mean by that are those at the bottom half of that list, the ones that don't have as many applicants or exactly enough applicants to fill the positions, and also potentially for those folks that are already serving on boards and you've interviewed them before, and so this would be a re-interview, so you could reduce those to 7 minutes. So, hope that didn't confuse you more than
That's crystal
easier
clear.
for you.
That makes sense. I like that plan. Councilmember Bagley.
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. I like that plan too. Councilmember Moore. I guess I would add one more suggestion, and that would be, would it be, I mean, why not, if we've got like the Callahan House Advisory Board, they've got 3 vacancies and 3 applicants, can't we request that the staff person responsible for that board interview them, and then in the event that there is a concern, let us know? I mean, because why do we need to interview 3 people for 3 positions? No, I know it's the council's job, but we're going to appoint them unless there's a red flag. And so I don't think we all need, just like I want to interview all the boards, I don't want to waste time. So we've got like a museum advisory board that's got 1 seat, 1 vacancy. We've got the Callahan House that's got 3 applicants, 3 vacancies. So I guess what I'm saying is that I don't see a need for all of council to interview all 3 people when there's no competition. And so, and so if it's important enough to interview them, it's certainly important enough to interview everybody. But I don't think we should interview them.
Thank you, Mayor. I would disagree. If we're going to interview everyone, then we should interview everyone. That's what I've heard from, since I've been on council, we've done it several different ways each time, every time. It seemed like everyone was talking that we needed to interview everyone as a panel, and that's what the majority of council had agreed to, regardless if they had 3 vacancies, 3 people. We need to see if these folks are qualified, regardless of there's 3 vacancies, 3 applicants. That's the purpose of interviewing applicants, to be able for them to see us and for them and for us to see, vice versa. So we need to be able to do that. I do like Councilmember Moore's suggestion. It's always nice to have another fresh perspective. So I really appreciate that. My concern is the late applicants. We've opened up a can of worms again. Unlike the days of when I first got on council, where council members were bringing applicants to the council meeting and then taking votes on them at the council meeting, which happened quite often. We have a day up, a day late, 3 days late, and 2 weeks late. What's the purpose of having deadlines if we're not going to adhere to them? I will take into consideration the late applicants and how they were turned in, but I would caution that we do not take any more late applicants. Several of these people are returning members to those boards. They know the deadlines. We all ran for council. We all know what the deadlines are. I would be hesitant to take any more late applicants. So I don't know what the vote was when you sent out the emails about. I know I said I would. So my phone's going off. Excuse me. It's on vibrate though. I wouldn't have a problem with it, like a day, but we really need to adhere to deadlines. So that's all I have to say about that.
Councilmember Christensen.
I agree with Councilmember Santos about, lastly, what he mentioned was deadlines if they're just now coming in, the previous ones were a day or 2 late, and that's understandable. Things happen, but if things are coming in weeks late, then that's a little bit more problematic for me. I also agree that with Councilman Santos that we need to interview them, even if it's a shorter, say a 7-minute interview. I think we need to, even if there are 3 openings for 3 people, there's a possibility, how would we see a red flag? Because if the person in charge of that ward, there's a possibility of people stacking things, which I don't think any of us want. I'm sure we don't. I would also suggest that we leave open, because things never really quite work out the way they seem to, leave open one day for an overflow for people that we didn't quite get in that one day. Or just have a little flexibility, say, interview people from 8 to 3, and then have another day when we interview them from 5:30 to 7. It gives us a little more flexibility.
Mayor Coombs and members of council, we can structure this however you like. We just need that direction so we can get the right number of people there. Because the one thing we don't want to do is have applicants there, have them wait for their turn, and then have them sent home without an interview.
You know, I kind of agree with the one day this time of year. Get it done, and you know, if something happens or one of the council members can't stay for the whole day or something like that, then at least we have 5 or 6 people interviewing. I think we should just go ahead with moving these 3 boards to January, having the 10-minute interviews for the competitive, having the 7-minute interviews for the less competitives, and just get it done. That's my recommendation. Councilmember Moore.
Well, thank you, Mayor Coombs. I believe we need to interview whether they're competitive or not. And I think that there's an expectation from the people that applied that they're going to be able to visit with our council members. And in a tragic case, we may not want to put one of those people on a board. I mean, we don't have to vote. We don't have to fill just because they applied. And in addition to that, the council is responsible and accountable for the positions on those boards, and I believe that interviewing them is not only appropriate, but we owe that to the community.
Councilmember Finley.
Finney. Just call me Finney. Thank you, Mayor Coombs. I would make an actual motion that we go with Plan D here, which is to move the highlighted boards to January and interview all candidates for 10 minutes, except for we reduce the time for competitive boards.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Let's vote.
Could you please raise your hand because I'm not over there to run the equipment?
Okay, passes 6-0 with Councilmember Levison absent.
Then I have one more question. I won't commit you to this tonight, but I will have Michelle send out to you a request for interview times in January, because we would need to get that on your calendar pretty quick. Probably a Saturday, 4th, 11th, or the 18th. So we'll send that out to you via email and get that arranged. Probably will only take about a half day or less if you have these boards.
Councilmember Santos.
Thank you, Mayor. Valerie, are the late applicants noted in the on the packets? Do you know that, if they are?
I am not sure, but Michelle certainly knows which ones those are. Well, they're listed right here, so we will certainly make sure that they are as they come for interview.
I'll hang on to this too. Thanks.
Councilmember Hagler.
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. Not a problem. I acquiesce to the wisdom of my colleagues. I guess my only question is, Valerie and Harold, just out of curiosity, the General Employee Retirement Board. It just seems like, I mean, I can understand the others. Do we know why the up spike? Why is that so competitive? What's going on?
Mayor Coombs and members of council, I do know, because we have had a very difficult time even getting one person to apply for that. So we sent a letter to every retired employee on the plan.
Gotcha. Okay.
We got a lot of response.
Yeah. So how about no more letters? No, just kidding. Thank you, Valerie. I knew there was a reason.
Okay, I guess we're done. Now it's time for final call, public invited to be heard. Is there anyone from the audience that would like to come down and speak at this time? Seeing no one, I'll close final call, public invited to be heard. Time for council or mayor comments. Councilmember Santos.
Thank you, Mayor. One thing I did notice, there were no, getting back to the previous discussion, there were no applicants for the library board. Can we we should definitely re-advertise for that.
Yeah, we generally wait till January to do that, just simply because we're still going through this process and we don't want people to be confused about what they're applying for.
So other than that, I wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving and a very safe holiday and safe travels to anybody that's traveling.
Councilmember Finley.
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. I'd like to remind everybody that Saturday is Small Business Saturday, and that they should shop here in Longmont at some well-deserving small business. And with that in mind, my business of the week is Apparel Valley, which is at 471 Main Street. They have awesome things. You should go there and spend some money this Saturday.
Councilmember Bagley.
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. I guess I just want to take a moment and address a problem that I think if we actually, first of all, I'd like to thank former Councilmember Hanson for his service. He served 4 years. Having done this now for 2 years, I realize how difficult it can be and the mistakes that can be made, and just want to once again express my appreciation for the 4 years of service that he gave this community, and sitting up here behind this dais. I do want to just mention, however, that in all fairness to myself, I've had breakfast with Brian Hanson. I have met with Brian Hanson in my office. I've had multiple phone calls with Brian Hanson. I have asked that he provide me a write-up of his issue, which he has done. I have had no less than probably 24 conversations with Wendell Pickett, who is the next-door neighbor to Brian Hanson, who Councilmember Hanson is having a current problem with. I am sympathetic to former Councilmember Hanson's dilemma, and just to kind of bring everybody up to speed so we all know what's going on, and I don't know what to do about it. So I figured council comments, let me make a comment. You've got Wendell Pickett, who owns Mountain View Welding, who lives across the street from Brian Hanson. Brian Hanson conducts business and lives in his house across the street from Wendell Pickett. And Brian Hanson is of the belief that Wendell Pickett shouldn't be operating his business where it's currently located. There is a definition of light versus heavy industrial zoning. Wendell Pickett views it one way. Brian Hanson views it another. And this has been an ongoing feud for several years. I don't know what to do about it. And I don't think the answer is to shut down Wendell Pickett. I don't think the answer is for Brian Hanson to move. But I have explored with both of these gentlemen, Brian Hanson purchasing the property for a reduced rate. I have talked to Wendell Pickett and looked at having him purchase property elsewhere. I have encouraged Wendell Pickett to, reach out and keep the radio down and the sound down, and they've moved their metal. Anyway, my point is that I think that was presented today, I felt was a little disingenuous, because I have had several conversations with Brian Hanson and Wendell Pickett to the point where if it were billable hours, it would be quite lucrative. So, but nevertheless, I know that Brian Hanson continues to be frustrated. You could hear that, and I think it's legitimate concerns, but I don't know what to do about it. So, in case you are wondering what that was about, including Wendell Pickett's name on the example, that's it. So, now we're all up to speed, and if you have any further questions after council meeting, I'd be more than willing to answer them.
Councilmember Moore.
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. It's interesting that he thinks that's heavy industry, because that's a welding shop, and I've used Mountain View Welding over the years. They're a nice small business to work with. They do good work. They're an asset to the community to have a fabrication location that's in Longmont. And if they want to see heavy industry like a steel mill or aluminum plant, let me know. I can put them in contact.
Thank you, Justin.
Well, I'd like to acknowledge young fifth grader Gabe King, who challenged me to a rematch in a 5K. He beat me by a handful of seconds at the Rogers River Run, and he went out and he was going to totally destroy me, and sure enough, he ran like a 20-minute, 56-second 5K as a 11-year-old fifth grader, and so my 23-minute 5K was, he was done taking a shower and eating breakfast by the time I came across. So anyway, hats off to the fifth grade athlete, Gabe King. So city Manager, do you have any remarks?
No comments, Mayor, Council.
Okay, City Attorney, any remarks?
No comments, Mayor.
All right, this meeting is over.
Thank you.